Here is the story text in a reusable format. The wind did not simply blow across the Montana Territory. It howled like a lonely spirit
I found this
searching
in your
for a place
coat.
to rest.
Clara, I can explain
In the
everything.
year 1885,
Who is this woman?
survival for a woman
She was my
depended on
wife.
two things only: the strength inside her chest, or the shadow of the man
My
who
name
stood
is not
beside her.
Silas. It's Arthur
Clara Montgomery
Thorne.
stood alone on a frozen train platform,
And this was
and
my
knew
life.
she had already lost one of those things. She had lost everything back east when a silver mine collapsed and buried her future under stone and debt. The last of her money had bought her a one-way ticket west. Now she stood at the Blackwood station with one small trunk and numb fingers, staring at the man everyone whispered about. They called him Ragged Silas. He stood apart from the others, dressed in animal hides and worn wool stitched so many times it barely held together. Snow clung to his boots. His beard was thick and wild, the color of chestnut bark. He looked like a man carved from dirt and stone, a man with nothing to offer but cold hands and a harder life. The train whistle screamed like a funeral song as it pulled away, leaving Clara behind. The sky above the station was dark and heavy, the color of a deep bruise. Winter was not coming. It had already arrived. In the West, a woman alone was not free. The law had made that clear. The local marshal had told her she could not stay in the boarding house without a husband or steady work. There were no jobs left for women like her. She had two choices only: return east to hunger and shame, or take the hand of the man waiting at the edge of the platform. His name was Silas Thorne. To the people of Blackwood, he was barely a man at all. He came down from the mountains twice a year to trade furs for salt and iron. He did not drink in the saloon. He did not speak unless spoken to. Folks said he lived in a hole in the ground and ate like an animal. They said he owned nothing but the rags on his back. Yet when Clara looked at him, she did not see cruelty. His eyes were calm and deep like still water that had seen many storms and survived them all. "I have a cabin," Silas said quietly. His voice was low, steady, like distant thunder rolling through the hills. "It is far. The walk is hard, but you will be safe. You will be respected." Clara looked down at her thin shoes and then toward the jagged peaks of the Bitterroot Range rising in the distance. She knew nothing about mountains. She knew only hunger, cold, and loss. But she saw no threat in this man, only strength, a strength she no longer had on her own. With a trembling hand, she reached out and took his. The circuit judge performed the ceremony in less than 5 minutes. No flowers, no music, just two strangers binding their lives together so they would not freeze alone. When it was done, Clara Montgomery was no longer alone in the eyes of the law. As the sun dipped behind the mountains, Silas lifted her heavy trunk onto his shoulders as if it weighed nothing. He did not turn toward the road that led back to town. He pointed instead toward the highest ridge, the one people said no man should climb. "The path is narrow," Silas said softly. "Follow my tracks. Do not look back." They stepped off the trail and into the dark timber. The last lights of Blackwood vanished behind them. Clara felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold. She was not just leaving town. She was disappearing from the world. The forest swallowed them whole. The air smelled of damp earth and ancient sap. Towering pines blocked out the sky. For a long time, the only sound was the crunch of Silas's boots breaking the frozen ground. Clara followed, her breath coming out in short white clouds. The silence pressed against her ears. No bells, no voices, only the great quiet of the mountains. Silas moved with an ease that surprised her. For a man so large, his steps were light and sure. Every few minutes he stopped and listened, his head tilted slightly, reading the mountain as if it were speaking to him. "Wait," he whispered. Clara froze, her heart pounding. She expected danger. Instead, Silas knelt beside a frozen stream. He broke the thin ice with his boot and filled a small wooden cup. "Drink," he said. "The high air steals strength if you do not." She drank the icy water, her fingers brushing his rough skin. His hands were scarred and hard, yet careful. As she watched him look toward the peaks, she realized he was not struggling here. He belonged. As they climbed higher, the path grew dangerous. Dirt gave way to slick stone and narrow ledges with sharp drops below. Fear tightened in Clara's chest. She had thought him poor, but here his knowledge was worth more than gold. By dusk, the wind changed. It carried the smell of snow. Silas stopped beneath a massive rock overhang. "We stop here," he said. Clara looked around. There was no cabin, no fire, only cold stone. "Where is your home?" she asked, her voice shaking. "The mountain has other plans tonight," Silas replied. He moved quickly, gathering fallen branches and dry needles. Choosing carefully, he struck flint and steel, coaxing fire from moss and sparks. Soon a small flame danced against the stone, casting warm light on his face. "The mountain speaks," he said quietly. "If you listen, she lets you stay." He gave Clara willow bark to chew, easing the ache in her head. She watched him work with hands that knew patience and precision. This was no brute. This was a man who understood things the town never bothered to learn. "Why do they call you Ragged Silas?" she asked. "They see clothes," he said, "not the man." The fire faded, the cold deepened. Silas stood and looked toward the peaks. "Rest," he said. "Tomorrow we climb higher." Morning did not bring sun. It brought steel gray sky and wind that cut through wool. Silas woke her before dawn. "The pass is close," he shouted. "If we reach the far side, we live. If not, the snow buries us." They climbed hard, trees shrinking and twisting as the air thinned. Ice stung Clara's face. Snow came sideways, erasing the world. She slipped. Before she could fall, Silas caught her, pulling her into a narrow break between stones. He wrapped her in his heavy buffalo hide. "Body heat," he said calmly. "That is what matters now." As the storm raged, he spoke of stars and directions, his words steady, his voice educated. Clara listened to his heartbeat, strong and sure. She felt safe in a way she had not felt in years. When the wind finally eased, silence followed. As Clara shifted, something slid from inside Silas's coat. It caught the pale light. Gold. She lifted it, her breath catching. A fine locket. Inside, a painted portrait of a woman dressed in Eastern silk. Beside it, an etched drawing. Not a cabin, a grand structure of stone and glass. Silas's hand closed gently over hers. "That life is gone," he said. "You are not what they say," Clara whispered. Silas stood as the storm broke apart. The sun rose over a world of white fire. "Come," he said. "It is time you see why I brought you." They climbed above the clouds. The air grew warm, strangely soft. Silas led her to a cliff face that looked impossible. Then he pulled aside frost-covered branches. Stone steps appeared, carved into the mountain itself. Clara's heart pounded as they climbed. The passage opened suddenly onto a hidden valley glowing green and alive, protected from the wind. Steam rose from pools of clear water. The air smelled of warmth and earth. "This is where the mountain keeps her secrets," Silas said. As the mist thinned, Clara saw it. A massive structure of cedar and quartz rising from the stone, catching the light like a dream. Her breath failed her. "That," Silas said softly, "is home." And in that moment, Clara knew she had not married a poor man at all. She had married a man who had hidden an entire kingdom from the world. Clara stood frozen at the edge of the hidden valley. Her breath caught somewhere between fear and wonder. The world she had known ended behind her, buried under snow and distance. Ahead stood something that should not exist in the Montana Territory of 1885. A house of stone and glass rising from the mountain as if it had grown there on purpose. Silas waited beside her, giving her time. He did not rush her forward. He understood that some truths needed silence before they could be accepted. They walked slowly down into the valley. With every step, the air felt warmer, softer. Steam drifted from clear pools scattered among the rocks. Green plants clung to life where no green should exist. Clara bent down and touched the ground. It was not frozen. It was alive. "The mountain bends here," Silas said. "The ridges block the wind. The springs warm the earth. It stays hidden unless you know where to look." Clara tried to speak, but no words came. She had crossed hunger, cold, and fear to get here, and now she stood in a place that felt untouched by suffering. They reached the house as the sun sank low, painting the quartz walls in gold and violet. The structure was massive but gentle. Wide eaves stretched outward to guard against snow. Tall windows reflected the sky. Heavy stone walls rose from the rock itself, fitted so tightly they seemed grown rather than built. "How did you do this?" Clara asked quietly. "One piece at a time," Silas said. "Over years." He opened the heavy oak door. Warm air flowed out to meet them. Not smoky or damp, but clean and steady. Inside, the floor was smooth slate. Cedar walls lined with shelves reached up toward a high ceiling. Light filtered in through tall glass panels. Even as dusk fell, Clara stepped inside and felt her legs weaken. This was no trapper shelter. This was a home built with thought and care. Books filled the shelves, real books, not just ledgers or manuals, but volumes on plants, stars, stone, and design. Silas lit oil lamps one by one. The light revealed a long table covered in rolled papers and tools, blueprints, drawings like the one she had seen in the gold locket. "This is where I worked," he said, "when the storms trapped me here, when the world below felt too loud." Clara walked slowly through the room, her fingers trailing along the shelves. She felt like an intruder in a dream. They ate a simple meal of dried meat, roots, and warm water drawn from a stone basin, running water. Clara stared as it flowed freely. "The spring sits higher," Silas explained. "The pressure does the work." That night, Clara slept in a real bed, wrapped in clean wool, listening to the soft hum of wind far above the valley. For the first time since her life collapsed back east, sleep came without fear. Morning brought quiet light and warmth. Outside, snow raged somewhere beyond the ridges, but here the valley breathed calmly. Silas showed her the garden plots warmed by channels of spring water. He showed her storage rooms filled with dried food and tools neatly arranged. "You plan for everything," Clara said. "I plan to survive," Silas replied. Living came later. As the days passed, Clara learned the rhythms of the hidden valley. Silas taught her which plants healed and which harmed, how to read the sky even when clouds hid the sun, how to listen to silence and hear warning inside it. In return, Clara brought order to the scattered papers and journals that filled the house. She labeled, sorted, and preserved his work. She wrote down his methods in clean, careful script. Silas watched her with quiet gratitude. One evening, as snow piled high against the windows, Clara asked the question that had been waiting between them. "Who were you before this?" Silas stood by the hearth for a long time before answering. Finally, he set a gold locket on the table between them. "My name was Arthur Thorne," he said. "I was an architect in Boston." Clara listened as he spoke of iron frames and tall buildings, of wealth and applause, and of a wife who grew weaker as the city grew stronger, of air thick with smoke, of loss that could not be repaired. "I came west to forget," he said. "But the mountain does not let you forget. It strips you down until only truth remains." Clara reached for his hand. "You didn't run," she said. "You built something better." The wind howled beyond the ridges, but inside the house of stone and light, two lives slowly began to knit together. And far below, the world believed ragged Silas had vanished into the cold, never knowing that above the clouds, a new beginning had already taken root. Winter closed around the Bitterroot Range like a clenched fist. Storm after storm buried the peaks, sealing the hidden valley away from the rest of the world. Down below, towns disappeared under snow, and hunger crept into cabins. But above the clouds, the valley breathed on, warm and steady, as if the mountain itself stood guard. Inside the house of stone and light, life took on a quiet rhythm. Each morning, Silas checked the water channels and the garden beds warmed by the springs. Clara learned to harvest winter greens and dry roots for storage. She learned how to read the subtle signs of weather that never reached the valley floor, but still whispered their warnings. At night, they sat by the hearth as the wind roared far above them, unable to reach their walls. Clara read aloud from books Silas had carried piece by piece into the mountains. Histories, poetry, plans for buildings never built. Silas listened, sketching as she read, his hands steady, his mind alive again. The man the town called ragged Silas slowly faded. In his place stood a man who laughed softly, who spoke of ideas, who planned not just survival, but a future. One evening, as snow pressed thick against the windows, Clara stood in the library holding a small stack of journals. "These deserve more than hiding," she said. "Someday the world should know what you built here." Silas looked at her, the firelight catching in his eyes. "I didn't build this for the world," he said. "I built it so one's soul could breathe freely." Clara stepped closer. "Then let me be that soul," she said, "with you." Spring came late to the high country, but when it arrived gently. Snow melted into singing streams. New shoots pushed through the warm soil. The valley filled with color and life. Together they expanded the house. A new wing grew from stone and timber. Windows opened toward the morning sun. Silas's sketches took shape under Clara's careful planning. Where grief had once guided his hands, hope now did. Far below, rumor spread. Trappers spoke of steam rising from impossible heights. Hunters told stories of green valleys hidden in winter, but no one ever found the path. The mountain kept its secret. One clear morning, Clara stood on the ridge above the house, looking out over endless peaks. She thought of the girl who had stood trembling on a train platform, believing she had married the poorest man in the territory. She smiled. Silas joined her, slipping his hand into hers. "They think we vanished," she said. "Let them," he replied. "We found what we needed." Years later, when the storms of life had softened into memory, the house still stood strong and warm, a testament not to wealth or pride, but to patience, knowledge, and love strong enough to climb above the clouds. Clara had not been rescued from the cold alone. She had been led into a kingdom built by bare hands and a broken heart that learned how to hope again. And in the silence of the high mountains, far from judgment and fear, 2 lives proved that the greatest treasure of the Old West was not gold buried in the ground, but a home built where the world could not take it away. If you enjoyed this story, please share, like, and subscribe to U.S. Wild West Love Story.
Thought I was just a simple man you chose. Guess there were secrets that I never showed. Behold my kingdom built on dust and stone, this mountain mansion that you'll now call home. My secret kingdom for my darling Clara. Yeah, my secret kingdom will start a new era.
Folks reckon some secrets are better left buried in the Blackwood snow.
But we pushed on through a winter more brutal than I ever imagined.
Between the freezing winds and fading light, a flicker of fire kept hope alive.
I can only take you so far. The rest is up to you.
Then we saw it, a kingdom in the clouds, built from stone and grit.
We weren't just surviving anymore. We were finally home.